What if I told you that every time you watch porn, your brain thinks it's preparing you to pass on your genes? That your mind doesn't see a screen, it sees an opportunity for survival. And yet, this ancient system is being hijacked over and over again until the real you gets buried under artificial desire. Today, we're going to uncover exactly how your brain's reward system works and why understanding it is a first step to breaking free from porn addiction. If you're ready to reclaim your mind, stay till the end, because this knowledge can change your life forever. The human brain is one of the most sophisticated survival machines in the universe. Every decision you make, from eating your favorite meal to pursuing a romantic partner, is guided by a biological system built to reward behaviors that help you survive and reproduce. This is called the reward system, and it operates through a chemical messenger known as dopamine. Dopamine is often misunderstood. Many people think it's the pleasure chemical, but that's not entirely true. Dopamine is more about motivation than pleasure itself. It's a signal that says, this is important, pay attention, go after it. When you eat a delicious meal, when you achieve a goal, or when you feel attraction to someone, your brain releases dopamine to encourage you to repeat that behavior in the future. For most of human history, this reward system worked beautifully. Food wasn't always available, so the dopamine spike from finding it motivated us to keep looking. Mating opportunities were rare, so the dopamine spike from sexual intimacy kept our species alive. But here's the problem. This ancient system evolved in a world of scarcity. Today, we live in a world of digital abundance, and that's where pornography comes in. Pornography is like a super stimulus, an exaggerated version of something your brain is already wired to seek. Think of it like fast food for your sexuality. It delivers an intense hit of dopamine without the real-life effort, connection, or intimacy that sexual relationships require. When you watch porn, your brain thinks you've just discovered an abundance of potential mates. And because most porn is varied and constantly changing, it triggers what scientists call the novelty effect. Every new scene, every new face, every new act keeps the dopamine flowing. This endless novelty is something real life can't compete with. In the animal kingdom, when a male mates with female, his dopamine levels eventually drop and his interest in her decreases, a phenomenon called the Coolidge effect. This mechanism exists so the male will seek out new partners, increasing genetic diversity. But in porn, novelty is infinite. With just a scroll or a click, you can have hundreds of new partners in a single session. Your brain doesn't know it's fake. It reacts as if each new clip is a real mating opportunity, flooding you with dopamine again and again. Here's the catch. The more you stimulate the dopamine system artificially, the more your brain adapts. Neurons start reducing dopamine receptors to avoid overstimulation. This means the same amount of porn produces less excitement than before, a process called tolerance. You might find yourself searching for more extreme or taboo content just to get the same dopamine hit. This is the same neurological pathway that underlies drug addiction. And just like drugs, the withdrawal isn't physical pain. It's emotional and motivational flatness. When dopamine receptors are downregulated, normal life activities, talking to a friend, working on a project, even experiencing real intimacy, feel dull in comparison. The brain has been trained to expect the high-intensity stimulation of porn, so real-world rewards seem bland. This is where the addiction cycle becomes powerful. A stressful day, feelings of loneliness, or boredom can trigger the memory of porn as a quick fix. Your brain says, I know what can give us that spike again. You watch, you get the dopamine hit, and for a short while you feel good. But afterward, the emptiness returns, often stronger than before, because the root problem hasn't been addressed. Over time, the cycle deepens neural pathways associated with porn use, making the habit feel almost automatic. Understanding this is crucial because it shows you that quitting porn isn't about willpower alone. It's about working with your brain's biology. Once you realize your reward system is being manipulated, you can begin to take back control. You can start rewiring your brain by removing artificial superstimuli and reintroducing natural sources of dopamine, like physical exercise, meaningful social interaction, creative challenges, and skill building. Think of it this way. Your brain is like a garden. Dopamine is the sunlight that makes certain behaviors grow. Right now, Porn has been soaking up most of that sunlight, overshadowing other areas of your life. To quit, you're not just cutting down a weed, you're planting new seeds and giving them more light. Over time, your brain will adapt back to a healthier baseline. The colors of life will return. The reward system isn't your enemy. It's one of your greatest allies. It's what drives you to improve, connect, and thrive. But like any powerful system, it needs to be used the way it was designed. When you understand how it works, you stop being a prisoner of your impulses and start becoming the architect of your own mind. This is why education is a first step. Because once you see the mechanism clearly, once you understand that porn is hacking into your brain's survival circuits, you can never unsee it. And that awareness is what gives you the power to say, no more. I decide where my dopamine goes. I decide what my brain craves. I decide who I become. Every addiction has its own chemistry, but porn addiction has something more subtle and insidious, a network of mental traps that pull you back in, even when you decided to quit. It's not just the dopamine spikes or the rewiring of your brain. It's the way certain emotions, situations, and cues become linked to behavior so deeply that you can relapse without even realizing how you got there. One of the biggest traps is emotional state dependency. Think about it. There are days when you feel stressed, anxious, or overwhelmed, and your brain immediately recalls something that once gave you instant relief. Porn becomes that quick release valve. Over time, this link becomes automatic. Stress equals porn. Then there are days of loneliness or boredom. In these quiet, empty moments, the mind starts looking for stimulation, and the memory of a pleasurable escape comes rushing back. It doesn't even feel like a conscious decision. It's more like an itch you're compelled to scratch. This is where the habit loop takes control. The process is almost invisible while it's happening. There's a cue, a trigger that might be a feeling, a thought, a location, or even a specific time of day. That cue creates a craving, a mental pull toward a behavior. The response is the act of seeking out porn, and the reward is the dopamine hit and temporary relief from whatever emotion you were feeling. The brain learns that this loop works, at least in the short term, so it keeps repeating it. The danger lies in how silent and automatic this loop becomes. Environmental cues can be just as powerful as emotional ones. Maybe it's a particular device you use, a room where you're alone, or even the sound of a notification that reminds you of past behavior. These cues become anchors in your mind, linked to the addictive act through repeated pairing. You could be feeling perfectly fine, but one of these environmental triggers can activate a craving before you've even processed what's happening. Another trap is escalation. When the brain gets used to a certain level of stimulation, it seeks more intense or novel experiences to reach the same dopamine high. This means you might start searching for content you never thought you'd watch, pushing boundaries just to feel something close to what you once did. This escalation can deepen shame and guilt, which ironically can push you back to porn for comfort, a cruel loop where the addiction feeds itself. There's also the rationalization trap. The brain becomes incredibly skilled at justifying what it wants in the moment. You might tell yourself, just this once won't hurt, or I've been stressed, I deserve this, or I'll quit tomorrow. These are mental bargains designed to give you permission to continue the habit without facing the reality of its cost. The more you believe these small lies, the more ingrained the behavior becomes. Social isolation adds another layer. When porn becomes a private escape, it can make you withdraw from real relationships. And the more you withdraw, the more you depend on that escape. Humans are wired for connection, but porn offers a counterfeit version of it. It feels like intimacy in the moment, but it's only an illusion. Real connection requires vulnerability, effort, and presence. The addictive cycle teaches the brain to settle for the imitation because it's easier, safer, and always available. What makes these traps so dangerous is that they're not always about sexual desire at all. They're about comfort, distraction, and avoidance. Porn becomes a coping mechanism for emotions you don't want to face. The problem is, every time you use it to escape, you're reinforcing the very neural pathways that make the craving stronger next time. You're also avoiding the emotional growth that comes from dealing with those feelings directly. The path out of these traps begins with awareness, recognizing the triggers and patterns that pull you in. This means paying attention to your emotional state, your environment, and your inner dialogue. It's not enough to simply say, I'll stop. You have to understand what's pulling you toward it in the first place. Once you can identify a trigger, you can insert a different response into the loop, one that doesn't lead to the same destructive outcome. For example, if loneliness is a common trigger, you might choose to call a friend, go outside, or engage in a hobby that connects you with others. If boredom is a trap, you could plan activities that challenge your mind and body before boredom sets in. If stress pushes you toward porn, you could replace that with a workout, meditation, or journaling to release tension in a healthier way. These alternative actions don't just fill time. They recondition your brain to associate those emotions with new, healthier rewards. Breaking free isn't about avoiding every trigger forever. That's not realistic. It's about weakening their hold over you. Every time you respond differently to a trigger, you're teaching your brain a new pattern. Over weeks and months, the neural connections that once led automatically to porn begin to fade, and the craving loses its power. Understanding these traps also removes some of the shame from relapse. Many people think relapse means weakness, but in reality, it's often just the brain following a well-worn path it's traveled for years. When you see it for what it is, a conditioned response to a trigger, you can step back, learn from it, and adjust your strategy. The key is to treat each slip not as proof you can't change, but as a signal pointing you toward a trap you haven't fully disarmed yet. In the end, porn addiction is less about a single overpowering urge and more about 1,000 small, automatic choices shaped by your environment, your emotions, and your memories. By shining light on the triggers and traps, you take away their invisibility, and what you can see, you can control. Awareness turns a hidden chains into something you can finally break. The human brain is not fixed. It's a living, changing network of connections that adapts to what we repeatedly do. This quality is called neuroplasticity, and it's the reason you can learn a language, play an instrument, or recover from certain brain injuries. But neuroplasticity doesn't only work in your favor. It also works against you if the repeated behavior you feed is harmful. With porn addiction, years of repetition create strong neural pathways that link certain triggers, emotions, and situations directly to porn consumption. Over time, these pathways become the brain's default routes. The goal of quitting isn't just to stop using porn. It's to rewire those routes entirely, so your mind starts moving in a healthier direction on its own. Imagine walking through a field where there's a clear, beaten-down path. It's easy to follow because it's familiar and effortless. This is what your brain's porn pathway looks like. Every time you've acted on a habit, you've walked that same mental path, making it more defined. Now imagine trying to take a new route through tall grass and bushes. At first, it's uncomfortable. It takes effort. You might even want to go back to the old path because it's quicker. But if you keep walking the new route, it becomes easier over time and the old path starts to fade. That's exactly how rewiring works in the brain. The first step in rewiring is removing the constant reinforcement of the old pathway. That means cutting off easy access to porn and reducing exposure to sexualized media that might trigger the same circuits. This isn't about living in fear of triggers. It's about giving your brain space to heal. Every time you resist the urge to go down the old path, you weaken it slightly. But resistance alone isn't enough. The brain needs something to replace the old pattern, a new, rewarding behavior that can take its place. Replacement is critical because the brain's reward system doesn't like a vacuum. If you try to simply stop without introducing new activities, you create a void that feels uncomfortable and unsustainable. The most effective replacements are those that produce real, lasting satisfaction and also engage your body and mind. Physical exercise is one of the most powerful tools here because it naturally boosts dopamine, endorphins, and serotonin, giving your brain a healthy form of reward. Creative pursuits, like music, art, writing, or learning a skill, can also be deeply rewarding and keep your mind engaged in a positive way. Another essential part of rewiring is disrupting the thought patterns that lead to relapse. Porn addiction often thrives on automatic thinking. The moment a trigger appears, the mind starts moving toward the old behavior without conscious analysis. Mindfulness training can interrupt this. By practicing the habit of observing your thoughts without immediately acting on them, you create a space between the trigger and your response. In that space, you can choose a different action. Meditation, journaling, or simply pausing to take deep breaths when you feel the urge can help strengthen this mental pause button. The rewiring process is also about shifting your relationship with pleasure. When you've been conditioned to seek intense, artificial stimulation, real-life pleasures may feel muted at first. That's because your dopamine baseline has been lowered by overexposure to high-intensity rewards. This can lead to a period where life feels dull or flat, a stage many call the flat line. Understanding that this is temporary is crucial. As your brain adjusts, you'll start to enjoy everyday activities again, and the pleasure from authentic experiences will return. Consistency is the invisible force that makes rewiring work. Neuroplastic changes happen through repetition, not random bursts of effort. It's like training a muscle. You don't get strong by going to gym once. You get strong by going regularly, even when you don't feel like it. Each time you make a different choice, each time you redirect your attention to a healthy activity, you're reinforcing the new pathway. Over weeks and months, the new path becomes easier to follow, and the old one becomes harder to access. It's also important to address the underlying reasons you turned to porn in the first place. Rewiring isn't only about building new habits. It's about healing the root causes that drove the old habit. This might mean learning healthier ways to cope with stress, developing emotional resilience, or building stronger social connections. The more your life is filled with purpose, connection, and growth, the less appealing the old behavior becomes. Accountability can greatly speed up the rewiring process. Sharing your goals with a trusted friend, therapist, or support group creates external reinforcement. When someone else knows your journey and checks on your progress, it becomes harder to silently slip back into old habits. Community also provides encouragement during the inevitable low points when motivation fades. Patience is perhaps the hardest part of rewiring. We live in a culture that craves instant results, but brain change is a slow, steady process. You might go weeks without seeing dramatic shifts, and that can be discouraging. But just as years of repetition created the old pathways, weeks and months of repetition will strengthen the new ones. Every small victory, every day you choose a new path, is a brick in the foundation of your future self. Ultimately, rewiring the mind is not about becoming someone entirely different. It's about returning to a version of yourself that is free from the artificial chains of compulsive behavior. It's about reclaiming your natural ability to experience joy, connection, and purpose without needing a screen to provide it. The brain you have today is not the brain you are stuck with forever. Each choice you make is a vote for the person you want to become. And over time, those votes add up, reshaping not only your neural pathways, but the course of your entire life. Quitting porn is not just about stopping a habit. It's about becoming a different kind of person, someone who no longer sees porn as a natural part of their life. This is why building a new identity is such a powerful part of the recovery process. Habits are deeply connected to how we see ourselves. If you still secretly believe, I'm the kind of person who uses porn, you'll always feel pulled back to that behavior. But when you begin to see yourself as a man who values self-control and healthy sexuality, every action you take is either a vote for or against that identity. Over time, these votes shape your reality. Think about it. Your old identity is like an old coat you've been wearing for years. It's familiar, comfortable, and even though it's worn out and doesn't fit right anymore, part of you still hesitates to take it off. Building a new identity means deciding to take off that coat. Even if at first you feel exposed without it, you might feel uncertain about who you are without the habit, and that's normal. It's not just about subtracting the bad behavior. It's about adding new layers to yourself that reflect the person you want to be. One of the most effective ways to shift identity is through consistent, intentional action. Identity follows behavior. The more you practice the behaviors of the person you want to become, the more your brain accepts that as your true self. If you want to be the kind of man who doesn't need porn, start acting like him now, even if it feels unnatural in the beginning. This could mean filling your day with meaningful work, being physically active, engaging in real social interactions, and developing hobbies or skills that make you proud. Your environment also plays a massive role in shaping identity. If your surroundings are full of triggers, temptation will constantly remind you of your old self. Changing your environment sends a signal to your brain that you are moving into a new life. This could mean rearranging your living space to make it more productive, setting up filters on your devices, or even spending less time in isolation. When your physical environment matches your desired identity, it reinforces your transformation on a subconscious level. Identity is also reinforced by language, not just the words you speak out loud, but the words you tell yourself in your head. Self-talk is powerful. If you keep saying, "I'm trying to quit," your brain hears uncertainty. But if you say, "I don't watch porn," it signals a finality that shapes your decisions. The shift from "I can't" to "I don't" is small but significant. "I can't" implies you still want it, but are restricting yourself. "I don't" implies it's not part of who you are anymore. Relationships can help anchor your new identity. When you surround yourself with people who share your values, it's easier to live in alignment with them. These people become a mirror that reflects back the person you're becoming. On the other hand, if the people around you normalize or encourage porn consumption, your old identity stays alive. That's why it's often necessary to evaluate your relationships and distance yourself from influences that pull you back toward the old version of yourself. A new identity is also about purpose. When your life has no clear direction, unhealthy habits fill the space. Purpose gives you a reason to endure discomfort and resist temptation. It doesn't have to be a grand, world-changing mission. Even small, personal goals can fill you with a sense of meaning that outshines the short-lived satisfaction of porn. Whether it's advancing in your career, building a strong relationship, improving your health, or mastering a skill, having something to work toward makes it easier to let go of destructive habits. One often overlooked part of identity change is learning to forgive yourself for your past. If you keep holding on to shame, you keep anchoring yourself to the old identity. Shame says, "This is who I am and I can't change." Self-forgiveness says, "I made mistakes, but I'm not defined by them." This mental shift is essential because it frees you to step into a future where you are no longer chained to your old behaviors. You also need to embrace the idea that identity is not something you wait to feel before you act. It's something you step into through action. A man doesn't start going to the gym because he already feels like an athlete. He feels like an athlete because he consistently shows up at the gym. In the same way, you will begin to feel like someone who is free from porn, not because you woke up one day and felt different, but because you kept acting like it day after day until it became second nature. The transformation into a new identity is not instant. It's gradual and layered. You'll have days where you feel like the new version of yourself is strong and unshakable, and days where you feel like you've slipped back into the old self. That's part of the process. Each time you choose a new path, you strengthen it. Each time you slip, but then return to the new path, you prove to yourself that the old identity no longer has the same power over you. In the end, building a new identity is not about becoming someone fake or forcing yourself into a mold. It's about uncovering the healthiest, strongest, and most authentic version of yourself. The version that doesn't need porn to cope, feel excitement, or find meaning. When you live in alignment with this identity, quitting porn is no longer a daily battle. It becomes a natural outcome of who you are. And that's the ultimate victory. When freedom isn't just something you fight for, but something you are. Quitting porn is not about winning a single battle. It's about transforming your mind, your habits, and your identity. We've explored how understanding the brain's reward system reveals why the addiction feels so powerful. We've looked at the triggers and root causes that keep you stuck, and how practical strategies can dismantle those chains. Most importantly, we've seen that lasting freedom comes from becoming someone new, someone who no longer even identifies with the habit. This journey is not a straight line. You will face temptation. You will have moments of doubt. But every time you choose discipline over impulse, you rewire your brain and cast another vote for the person you are becoming. Over time, those votes add up until the old version of you no longer fits. Remember, you are not just quitting porn. You are reclaiming your focus, your self-respect, and your ability to form deep, meaningful connections in the real world. The urges will fade. The clarity will return. And one day, you will realize that what once felt impossible has become second nature. You don't have to wait for the perfect moment to start. That moment is now. Make the decision. Take the first step and keep moving forward. Your future self is already thanking you.